Remote work is killing your friendships. Yep, you heard me. That's what I said. I am coming in right from the start with a hot take. Remote work really started to kick off into the mainstream during the pandemic, and those of us fortunate enough to be able to work from home, we had a pretty good time working from home. But a few years on from the pandemic, has the glow gone from remote work? And there's these office mandates that are happening again. Is that actually a good thing? We're going to dive into this today on the Super Fun Marketing Podcast. I feel like I'm baiting you with all of these questions, but like I said, we're going to talk about that today on the Super Fun Marketing Podcast. I always forget to introduce myself on the podcast, so I wrote a note here. I wrote a note to myself to do an introduction to myself. My name is Victoria. I am a marketer at a tech company here in Amsterdam, and the Super Fun Marketing Podcast is my podcast where I talk about fun things and also not so fun things that marketers want to know about, that we experience, that we talk about, that we care about. And if you're listening to this podcast today, could you please do me a favor and go and rate my podcast on whatever channel you are listening to it on? I saw I got a new rating on Spotify. Very happy with that. I'm now up to, I think it's 6 ratings on Spotify. If you haven't done that yet, please go and do that for me. I really appreciate it. And I see it when it happens and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And one other little thing, thank you for all of the kind messages about the maple ice lattes. I really appreciated that. Places to get them. Also, people agreeing that they loved maple ice lattes. You guys are the best. Keep sending me messages. I love it. It makes me feel very encouraged. And yeah, you guys are the best. But yeah, anyway, back to the podcast. So today I'm going to dive into something that people that work in tech companies are getting pretty used to, especially in the areas that we live in as well. And it's remote work. Surprise, surprise. I mean, I've already been talking about it for a couple of minutes, but remote work, in case you didn't know where this was going. But actually back at the end of 2023, so in September 2023, I wrote an article on my Substack about how remote work is impacting friendships. And I'm going to link that in the show notes, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today on this podcast. And basically, after I posted that article, I had so many people message me saying that they had similar kind of experience. And I think it's a really important topic because remote work, I think, is still going to be a part of our lives. And I think it's a really good thing that remote work is a part of our lives. But this is also a really important topic around, is remote work killing our friendships? So I'm going to talk about that in some more detail as well. Now, like I say, remote work didn't just come about at the start of the pandemic, although it's something that kind of hit the mainstream around the time of the pandemic. I don't know about you, but I used to associate it with people that kind of ran their own business or were starting up their own business, or freelancers, or if you ever had that, but occasionally if you had like a tradesperson coming to your house and you had to work from home. I remember one of my first jobs, if you wanted to work from home, it was like a really big deal because we used to leave our laptops at the office. I don't know if you could imagine that these days, but we used to leave our laptops at the office. They were almost like, might as well have been like desktop computers. And then at the end of the day, you had to do like a report on like all of the work that you had done, submit a report on all of the work that you had done. Yeah, that's what it was like a long time ago. But when the pandemic happened, a lot of us who were able to work from home had to work from home. We had experienced lockdowns. I don't know if you remember, if you shut that out of your mind. But once things started to open up again, remote work became much more of a norm for a lot of people, and especially a lot of people that work in tech companies. And there are definitely a lot of benefits for remote work, including opening up opportunities for a lot of groups of people. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But for example, you don't have to be in one specific country, in one specific city, in one specific office, sitting at one specific desk to be able to do that job anymore. You could work wherever to do your job. And it really broadens who might be able to actually do that work and that role without being blocked by these big things like geography, accessibility, commutes, schedules, etc. So remote work, a lot of positives to it, in my opinion. When I was thinking about this episode, I wanted to build off of this blog that I had written at the end of the year. But what I wanted to do was have a look at what's going on now and freshen it up a little bit. So what I had a look at was on the old Google. I did a little bit of a Google about remote work, and I found this great article, quite recent one actually, from New York Times. It was posted in March 2024 and it's titled Who Still Works From Home. I will link all of these articles that I'm talking about. I will link them all in the show notes. It's an interactive piece, so you can have a nice scroll through some nice graphics there. The report looked at people who are in the working age in the US, and 80% of that group work in person, and the remaining 20% work in either hybrid or fully remote. What the report also found is that the people that are mostly working from home, the groups that have the biggest proportion of the people that are working from home, people with disabilities and also people with young families too. And specifically within that, people with young families, it's mainly women as well. So really interesting article. Go and have a look through that, have a little scroll. But that basically comes back to what I was saying just previously about how remote work removed a lot of these barriers that would have excluded people from those kind of opportunities as well. So that report shows that there's a significant percentage of the population that have really had a lot of opportunities open up because of remote work. Another great article that I looked at was from the Washington Post by an author named Danielle Abril, and this was published in January 2024. The title of the article was No Office Mandates Don't Help Companies Make More Money, Study Finds. So there was a study that came out of the Katz Graduate School of Business at the University of Pittsburgh. Sometimes the names are just they're so long. But basically what this research found is that office mandates may not help companies improve their financial performance, but what they do is that they can make workers less satisfied with their jobs and work-life balance. What they said is that return to office mandates make workers less happy, therefore they're less productive and they're more likely to look for a new job. There's some really great research there that you can have a look at as well. Again, I will link it in the show notes. And then just one more benefit to working from home in case I haven't made my point. So this was one that was posted by HuffPost. It is by an author named Brittany Wong, and it's called 10 Undeniable Benefits of Working from Home According to Science. And this was also published in 2024. Here I picked out just a few of the ones that I thought were really interesting. But again, have a look at the article. I'll share that. But one of the things, remote workers experience a better work-life balance. 71% say working from home at least partially helps them balance their work and their personal lives. They also feel less micromanaged when they're working from home. So 71% say their manager or supervisor trusts them to a great deal and gets their work done when they're out of the office. Another one, remote workers tend to eat more healthy. So what they found is that when people were working from home, they tend to feel lower rates of stress, eat healthier meals, and have lower blood pressure. Another one, less commuting time means more time for work. During the pandemic, you might have seen people say things like people are more productive when they work from home. I also experienced that, but remote employees, because they are spending less time in traffic, they're spending more time working. So remote workers saved 72 minutes in daily commuting time, and on average, employees spent about half an hour of that extra time actually working. So on average, they're spending around about 2 more hours a week working because they're doing remote work. And then my final one that I picked for this was employees with flexible schedules tend to have better mental health. So workers with flexible schedules were 13% less likely to experience daily anxiety. So those are just 4 of the 10 benefits in this article. There's lots of benefits. But one of the reasons why I was thinking about this is that I saw recently, you might have seen it too, but Dell is changing their remote work policy. I found an article that talks about this some more. So it's from Business Insider. And the article is called Dell Workers Can Stay Remote, but They're Not Going to Get Promoted. One thing that's really interesting about this is that, so Dell has introduced some new policy around working remotely. And one thing that's interesting is that Dell has had a hybrid working culture. So hybrid meaning that they have an office, or you can come in, you can work in the office, or you can work remotely. Often that means working from home or working from the office. They had a hybrid working culture in place long before the pandemic. The article I was reading said for more than a decade. And there's a quote from somebody who has worked at Dell as a remote worker for more than a decade. And they said, I would say 10 to 15% of every team was remote. So pretty significant. But in February, Dell announced a new return to office mandate. And so for those people now who want to remain working remote, they will now, from May onwards, May 2024, they will be classified as either hybrid or remote, which when you're reading it like that, oh, okay, not too bad. But then here it goes. Hybrid workers have an approved office that they have to go into at least 39 days a quarter, which is around about like 3 days a week, roughly. But staff can still opt to go fully remote. But there's a catch. Fully remote workers will not be considered for promotion or be able to change roles. The Business Insider article, they got this internal memo from Dell, and it said, for remote team members, it is important to understand the trade-offs. Career advancement, including applying to new roles in the company, will require a team member to reclassify as hybrid on site. That's pretty significant change. So then if you want to get a promotion or you want to change roles, you have to then switch to coming into the office at least 3 days a week. There's all sorts of different return to office mandates that are happening at the moment. But the thing is, remote work really has a lot of positives. And as somebody, I work hybrid and I really value being able to work hybrid. And there are so many benefits to working remotely. But there are also some challenges. But the challenges, I don't think the challenges about working remotely are related to what some of these return to office mandates believe. I think that all of these benefits of like people being happier and like working better, etc., I fully believe that. But actually what I was thinking about with remote work is some of the other impacts that remote work has. And I was talking with some of my friends and colleagues when I was writing this article back in 2023. And we were talking about how remote work impacts friendships. This is especially because a lot of my peers are people who now live in a city that they didn't grow up in. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So my little disclaimer is I am a full advocate for remote and hybrid work. Okay, I fully believe that. But I also acknowledge that there are some challenges that come from remote work. But that shouldn't stop remote work from being a thing. I'm going to put that at the top of the episode before I lose you. But when you think of remote work, most people probably picture working from an exotic location or at your favorite cafe. You're visiting the beach after work. You're going on a picturesque hike at lunchtime, or you're making friends with your friendly neighbourhood barista. But what about some of the other possibilities of remote work? Isolation, loneliness, and burnout. And like I said, if I haven't emphasized it enough already, I am 100% a remote work advocate. I think that the freedom and the balance that a remote work lifestyle can bring is super important. And I think that a hybrid setup as well, I think is really good. So when I say remote work, I'm including the possibility for flexibility in terms of hybrid remote as well, if that is what you would like to do. And I don't know about you other marketers, but I personally find it much easier to do focus work like design or writing when I am at home and I can shut myself away in the office and just like fully focus on what I'm trying to do, can get away from distractions. But we have to be real that remote work is not always at an exotic destination. It's not always beaches. It's not always friendly cafes where you can get a table and get a spot to plug in your laptop. There's an amazing company called Kona. If you haven't heard of Kona, definitely go and check them out. In Kona's 2023 remote burnout report, they reported that 70% of remote workers had experienced burnout recently. And in a previous report, the Kona team also highlighted the challenge of building relationships while working remotely, which is very closely linked to burnout. So like I said before, a lot of benefits of remote work, but then there are also these very real challenges that are experienced as well. And this is very significant because having friends at work impacts not only how we feel about work and our work that we do, but it also impacts our overall well-being. And I'm sure that you can probably relate to maybe you've had a hard job before or a bad job, but you've had a friend that you can go and grab a coffee with when something bad has happened, or you can just go and debrief about something that's just happened. But it's really hard making new friends as an adult, and you probably have experienced that as well. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I have also been talking to my friends and colleagues about this a lot. And as somebody who moved countries in my late 20s, I have spent the past 6 years trying to make new friends in my new home, and it's definitely not always easy. And like I said, when I first shared this article, I had so many messages from people who I didn't know them before I published this article. I had so many people message me saying that they also were experiencing that. So a lot of people, especially in tech, especially in Europe, like moving countries, I'm sure if people in the States, like moving cities or states as well, you've probably experienced this as well. I'm sure this is a global experience if you move away from the place that you grew up. In 2023, I read a great book, another link in the show notes for you, which is called Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends by Dr. Marissa G. Franco. And in the book, there are some really big stats about friendship. Surprise! So a 2013 analysis of almost 200,000 participants across almost 300 studies found that friendship networks have been shrinking for the past 35 years. 4 times as many people have no friends in 2021 compared to 1990. So friendship rates have been decreasing for the past almost 4 decades, and 4 times as many people have no friends now or in 2021 compared to 30 years ago. The book highlights a number of things that are thought to be causing this. So people moving away from home, work demands increasing, and also the spread of technology like TV and smartphones. And this is actually linked to something that I talk about quite a lot, which is the parasocial relationship marketing era. The parasocial relationship is something that has really been on the rise since TV and smartphones became more of a thing in our lives. And I think also with influencers, this is probably becoming an even bigger part of why people have less friends in real life and more of these relationships where they feel like they are getting connection with people, but it's just one-sided. When I was reading this book, what it made me wonder is, will remote work speed this decline up even more? And one of the things that made me think about this is that in the book Platonic, the author talks about the link between propinquity, or proximity, because that's an easier word for me to say, and friendship. And Dr. Franco said, when we regularly place ourselves in physical proximity with others we can connect to, we are writing our own fate, acknowledging that we have control over our friendships and upping our chances of connection. So basically what she is saying is that by being around people, whether it's at work or at school, we are more likely to, just by being in regular close proximity with them, form friendships. And I'm sure that you've experienced it before as well, where you have these really close friends at your job and you're like so close, like you tell each other so much stuff and so much deep stuff. And then you change jobs or one of you leaves and then you almost go like no contact with them. There could be people who you don't really have anything else in common with other than that you work together. And that's why this thing of the proximity is like how people form like a lot of friendships as well, just by being in the same place with people over and over. This really got me thinking, because in the new country that I live in, my friends now are mostly people who I have met through my job, or they are friends of people that I work with. So also through job connections. And those people that are their friends are also people that they worked with. So how much of our community is formed by the physical workspace? And in this article, I use the term expat, and I probably will use this term in the podcast. But what I want to emphasize is that I often feel really weird about using the term expat. But the reason why I use it in this sense is not just to say somebody who has like moved, but I'm using it in the sense of saying like somebody who has moved temporarily as an expat, as in they have moved for probably like a couple of years. Like they know that they're only going to be in that place for a couple of years. And aside from just proximity, it's not surprising that so many of our friendships are linked to our workplace, because 70% of people say that having friends at your job is the most crucial element to having a happy work life. And I'm sure that you can relate to this, because I definitely can. We find enjoyment in our work through the people that we work with. And that also makes our lives more enjoyable and our work more bearable. And according to Gallup, I think it's how you say it, Gallup is one of those words I've always just seen written down and never heard it print like out loud. Gallup, Gallup. If you have a best friend at work, you are 7 times more likely to be engaged at your job. So friends at work not only make us happier, but they also have the potential to make us better at our jobs as well. But what does being an expat do to your friendships? So if you have ever moved countries and found it hard to form a deep friendship in that new country or city, especially among a transient community, so other expats, so people who are coming and going all of the time, there is a reason for that. So a psychologist, psychiatrist, and psychoanalyst named John Bowlby, who was the originator of attachment theory, he said, if people know each other and have long-term relationships, mutual help makes sense because I can help you today and 5 years hence you can help me. But if you aren't going to be here in 5 years and the community is constantly changing, it is by definition not mutually helpful. So basically what this guy, John Bowlby, is saying is that if we know that we don't have the possibility of having this person in our lives for a long time, which is quite common if you're an expat, like people here for like a year, 2 years, and then move on. That's why it can be hard to form these like deep friendships that you remember from when you were back home or when you were growing up. But what does this mean? Is all hope lost? If you're an expat working in a remote job, it's going to be a bit harder for you to make friends. But that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. And that's why I say a bit harder. It just means that you can't rely on the proximity of the office for building friendships. What does this mean? Will remote workers inevitably become unhappy loners? And will we eventually have to return to the office because we are desperate for friends and connection? A possible antidote for remote workers is the idea of the third space. And the third space, if you haven't heard about this before, it's a very sweet concept where if you think about your life, you have your first space, which is your home. And then traditionally we had the second space, which was the office. And then the third space were things like churches, sports groups, community groups, clubs, the local pub, etc. And the thing that was special about that third place is that it was a neutral space where you could come and you could connect with people and you were there at the same time. You were there every week and it was the same people day in and day out for years. The irony of this whole thing at the moment, though, is that both the second and third places are disappearing for a lot of people and they are instead being replaced with digital spaces. And you might want and need in-person connection, but some people don't and some people do, and that's all good. I actually read a study from 2018, which was titled Social Media Use and Depression and Anxiety Symptoms, a Cluster Analysis. I was reading about this on another episode that I did about how marketers need to stop fear-mongering. But basically, one of the things that the study found is that for some users of social media who were able to use social media more moderately, social media was actually a positive thing for them to maintain and build relationships, as well as help with self-expression and identity development. So that second and third space, or the third space being a digital space, isn't necessarily a bad thing for everybody, but it's not good for everybody. That's what I want to say, is that we can do a lot of these things online, and that works for some people, but there are other people that require or want to have more in-person connection as well. So the idea of the third space is to intentionally have a space that is outside of your home and outside of your office, where you meet people and you grow friendships, and it plays the role that, you know, for like those of us who are not working in the office every day, that the traditional office used to fill in our lives. So like I said before, nowadays, this could be like a sports club, a run club, a gym class that you go to at the same time, a craft class like art or pottery, or even regularly going to a cafe. It's important to remind yourself that in a lot of these spaces, there are a lot of people that are going with the same intention to connect with other people. There are a lot of people in these cities who also are trying to meet people and make friends. And personally, I find it easier myself if I am trying to go and like meet new people, if I go to these things like by myself rather than with another one of my friends. because I feel less self-conscious about going up and introducing myself to people. That's just for me personally. Maybe you want to take a buddy with you, but when I am going to meet somebody new, I find it easier to go and talk to the other person that is also by themselves. So that's just something to think about. Maybe you want to go by yourself to some of these things, which is scary, but remind yourself that a lot of these people are going to these events to meet people as well and to make connections with people. So don't be scared. And maybe you have also seen them as well, but there's a lot of these kind of group events popping up on TikTok and Instagram that are also designed for connections. So meeting people in your city that are in similar industries or similar roles who also want to come in together and make new friends and meet new people. You can also check out things like Eventbrite in your city or similar ones in your city to see upcoming events. So a few of my favorite tips from the book. Again, I definitely recommend that you read it because it was a really good book. I read it and audiobooked it as well. It's a very good one. But a couple of my favorite tips from the book. So friendship isn't based on luck. Be intentional and put yourself in places and settings that allow for continuous, unplanned interaction. So make sure that you're getting out of the house and going to the same places over and over again to meet people. Join something that reoccurs so that you have that repetition, that you have that proximity that the office used to have for you. Be yourself, be authentic, and assume that people will like you. Go in there thinking that people will like you rather than that you think that people will judge you or not want to be friends with you. Especially if you're going to these kind of things and like different events and networking events, like people want to meet people. They're not just going there if they don't want to talk to anybody. Go in there with that confidence of you being yourself and like putting yourself out there and just say hi to some people. Go up to somebody else that's like standing by themselves and say hi to them. I sound like I've just been making it really simple, but it is very simple to go and do that as well. If you think like how much it means to you if somebody comes up to you, if you're by yourself and they say hi, like it makes a big difference. It does make you feel good when somebody brings you into the social setting as well. And when you do start talking to people, listen a lot, repeat back what people are saying and ask them questions. That helps to really build a good connection. And then also connect your friends with other people as well. Be a connector. So if you meet somebody and you think, oh, my other friend will really like this person, like connect everybody. Have that culture going in your friend groups where you are building your friendships and inviting more people in. It's a really nice way to meet more people and to grow your friendships. Do errands together. You don't always have to do like big crazy things. Like after you've started to like meet these people, you go and walk the dog together or go to the hardware store if you need somebody to help you. That's a really good one as well. And also be generous. So help your friends as well. If they need something, help them. Or if you like be generous with your time as well. If they need help putting up curtains in their house or something like that, be generous, offer your time. And also be affectionate, but you don't have to be over the top about it. But use kind words, smile at them, show appreciation. Those things make a really big difference. All of that to say, remote work isn't actually the worst for making friends. It does make it a little bit harder, and you can definitely make connections virtually. And in fact, a lot of people actually thrive in those virtual environments. But what we do know about making friends is that proximity does make a big difference in your chance of making friends. And having friends at work also makes our work more enjoyable. This is definitely not to say that remote work sucks. Again, I'm going to say that I am a big fan of remote work. And we're not all going to be loners and we're not going to forget how to connect. I'm just trying to say that it's good to think about these things before you take a remote job as well. If you haven't taken a remote job before, think about these things as well. You don't just have that same social proximity that you do when you go to an office 3 to 5 days a week. And when you're trying to decide whether a remote job or a hybrid job might be your next step, think about how your friendships impact your life. So do you already have a lot of really close friends from other things, or is your job somewhere that you currently go where you connect with people and where you make a lot of your friendships? I know a lot of people who really value the flexibility of being fully remote and the opportunities that being fully remote offer up to them, as in like they can't get those opportunities in the place that they live, but they already have a lot of friends, a big friend group in the city that they live, and they do a lot of social things outside of work, like different clubs, like run clubs, meeting up with friends like a few times a week, etc. But I also know people who have chosen remote work and ended up really missing the social connection and the fun stuff that an office has to offer. So again, buyer beware. Like when you're choosing something, there definitely are positives and negatives to whatever office work setup that you want to do is. But I think that if you have choice is always a good thing, and consider the other implications that remote work may have on you as well. Like I said, this book, I will link it in the show notes. If you found this interesting, definitely read the book or listen to the audiobook if you like listening to things. It was really good, really interesting. There's some really practical things in there. There's also a lot of like nerdy science stuff, which I just love as well. So that book again is called Platonic: How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends by Dr. Marissa G. Franco. And my final thing before I go into my final segment is I just want to say that making friends can be really hard, but it's not that there's a problem with you. It's just hard to make friends. And that's basically what this book talks about as well. So yeah, don't be disheartened. You can make friends even if you have a remote job. I believe in you. But on to my final segment for the episode, which is things I'm thinking about this week, no action required. And this is a little mini one. I did a podcast episode about how social media is becoming a crab. A little joke about how everything eventually becomes a crab, which is not the actual true fact, but it's just much more catching. How everything becomes a crab. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because the episode was basically talking about how social media is all evolving to basically become the same thing. And this week, I don't know if you've also seen it, but people are talking about how LinkedIn is testing a new video feed, which is basically the TikTok for LinkedIn. And it got me thinking, like, do we really need that on LinkedIn? Do we really need another platform of just like video? I don't know. I love posting video on LinkedIn. I do it all the time. But is that really like what LinkedIn is for? I don't know. Like, I also know a lot of people are experiencing some big engagement dips or big impression dips from organic content on LinkedIn at the moment. And I'm sure that this is a way that they're trying to test and probably also prioritize like different content types. Again, there's no action required. I'm just telling you guys what I'm thinking about. It's really as simple as that. And yeah, I was also thinking about how the engagement is dipping on LinkedIn for a lot of people. And I was wondering if that's because there are more people that are posting on LinkedIn as well. I don't know. Are we seeing that? Or is it because we're just getting bored of all of the content and we're just like mindlessly scrolling and not really looking at stuff anymore? So maybe we do need video content on LinkedIn to get us back and hooked into the LinkedIn platform again. But I don't know. Just some thoughts about LinkedIn. I know a lot of people have like love-hate relationship with LinkedIn. I definitely do. I go through periods of loving being on there and just like messaging everyone and connecting with everyone and just having the best time. And then I'll go through periods of just being like, this platform is literally the worst. Like, I hate it here. But it's just, and sometimes I'm like, we're all just marketers just trying to market to each other on this platform. I don't know. I know there's definitely other people that are on LinkedIn as well, but it's an interesting platform. Again, there's no action required from this. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking about and letting you guys into my mind. But yeah, that's it for this week. Making friends is hard. Go say hi to somebody that you wouldn't normally say hi to. Have a great rest of your week. This is the Super Fun Marketing Podcast. I am Victoria. I'm just trying to make sure I do all of my important bit and leave a review, follow the podcast. Yeah, the sign up is too long. I'm going to go now. Leave you to whatever you're going to go and do. I'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.